as I want.
There's so much better ways you can make people laugh.
When you can make people laugh.
I said like there's much better ways.
Oh, okay. Like tickling. Not so much a joke teller as I am a tickler.
Imagine a stand-up comedian just comes in the audience. I paid for this?
Any other flips out there? Perfect. All right, cool. So first question is, let's do a little review from yesterday. There's one world to go into, and that's the world of a biblical reading. So if we're to take a biblical lens to the passage that we were looking at yesterday with Lisbeth Sandry and Rosa Sharon, what are some key things that we need to pick up on? Natalie, what's one thing we needed to notice?
Clothing.
Okay.
My main important.
Okay, and just keep going. Tell us more.
Because Elizabeth is wearing really dark clothing, dirty clothing, like men from Oxford.
Mhm.
And then as she leaves, there was that contrast of the manager coming and he's dressed in all white. And I feel like their clothing just reflects their character and their character's beliefs.
Excellent. And you know, just to keep it English 101, the darkness kind of represents probably what? Evil, yeah. And the white represents what's that? Goodness, purity. Excellent. So the clothing is a big thing to pick up on. Nancy, what's another thing we need to notice if we're going to do kind of a biblical lens on this passage? Yeah, keep going. Tell us about the Adam and Eve thing.
She shows that she's like
Who's the evil woman?
stalking.
And she's evil just like the what in the garden? In the garden. What's it?
Oh, the snake.
The snake, right? So if we think about an evil entity in the garden, which is the snake or the serpent, and then we think about Lisbeth Sandry, this old woman coming on the scene, we can definitely see that they're both these kind of dark characters, these kind of characters that have this is maleficence a word or is that made up? You know, the princess movie about the evil witch. Maleficent. Is it a real word or is it made up word?
It's not the word malfeasance.
Malfeasance? Oh, okay. So it's a real word.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So she's got this vibe to her. And then you have another character who's got you get this description of them being like dressed in white, and you have this vibe about purity, all this type of stuff. Excellent. Let's keep going. Another thing we need to notice, Derek. It's another thing we need to notice. I'll give you a hint. It's in the second paragraph, and it's about, Derek, look at me, it's about this big.
Oh, the apple book,
And what does the apple kind of trigger for us?
the same garden of Eden. Story of it.
Because there was in the garden, the tree of what, Derek, do you remember?
Tree of life.
The tree of knowledge of, there's even more. It's like, had to make it super confusing.
So I don't know.
Who can help me out? Yes. Yes, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. There's a lot going on. So it's basically a tree that represents knowing the difference between good and evil. Because for my resident Bible scholars, before Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, who got to decide what was good and evil? God, right? And so they live in this, what's the world? Eden is paradise. It's perfect. And they live in this world of perfection, of paradise that's been prepared for them. And someone up above is calling the shots about what is good and what is evil. Do Adam and Eve need to know that? No, not according to God's plan. They just live in the garden, they chill, they enjoy, and everything is good in the hood as long as they don't learn to make up for themselves what constitutes good and evil. Why is this such an important story? I mean, we're going to talk about this story a lot. Maybe 50% of the novels that we read, there's probably some aspect of the Garden of Eden. Why is it such an important story? Because when you're 4, who's making up your definition of good and evil for you? Your parents, right? And then at what age do you start to have to make your own decisions about what you think constitutes moral good and moral ill? 14 maybe? That's a good number. Anybody want to go higher or lower? Anybody want to play Price is Right? Preschool, whoa, you're out on the playground constituting good and evil as a preschooler, yeah? What were you gonna say?
When you start school, you have to decide for yourself your own thing.
Because once you start school, you encounter other what?
People.
Other people. And where before you're only around who? Your parents, right? Mom and dad. And so as you are socialized and brought out into the world, you have to start making decisions about, well, what's that kid doing? And is that the right thing? Do I want to model that kid or that kid? So, I mean, I don't know. It's a very complicated question. We could probably make an argument for just about any age because you have these stages in life where you're maturing. You're having to make your own decisions about what constitutes good and behavior. But that's why it's such an important story, because it's kind of like, it's a story that's a metaphor for what everyone goes through. And that is the loss of innocence, and the fall, right? And we'll talk more and more about this. And if you're in this class and you're like, what is going on right now? I get it. I'm kind of laying a lot of extra information on you that wasn't a prerequisite to the course, but it really works for this passage and it's a good introduction to the story. Okay, so we got the apple box, we got the clothing of the two characters. I think maybe we need one or two more things. Let me give volunteers. What's another thing we need to notice?
Maybe just the negative connotation, like the animal comparison.
Yeah, tell us about these animal comparisons.
You know, like the horse whisperer, the shiny black eyes, and so on.
The shiny black eyes, and what's her skin? Brown and wrinkled. So we think of who's got reptiles in the home. None of you are reptiles. Yeah, turtles. Oh, turtles hardly count. They're so cute. Oh, I'm talking about like snakes. Who's got scorpions in their house? No. Every year I have at least one kid that's got scorpions.
Ooh.
Every year. I don't know. People are crazy. So say that again. Alyssa who? What's her last name? Hitcher? Hitch. I don't know. I'd have to look.
I think that's her last.
I don't know if I have it,
name.
Alyssa.
Yeah, she has like every animal.
She has
She
every
has,
animal.
like, every animal in existence, and I love her.
Nice, very nice. Cool. So hopefully you notice that, like, when you stop and you look at a text really closely, I mean, you're trying to get through a 500-page book, so you're not doing this for every single page, obviously. But if you stop and you really treat it almost like poetry, you treat it like every word was selected for a purpose. This is the type of work that you can do. And then we talked about other things. I think the most coherent reading to notice is how there's maybe this biblical lens that you could place over it. Can anybody come up with why Steinbeck included this? He wants to spend, the middle of a chapter with Rosa Sharn encountering this woman. I mean, why bother? What's the point? That's like the number one question of this class. What's the point of including this in the book? Yeah.
I'm gonna go with foreshadowing.
I think that's a pretty good answer. Tell us more about foreshadowing. People are agreeing with you.
Because Elizabeth was like, if you sin, you're gonna drop the baby, your baby's gonna die. And then that's what happens at the end of the book. I don't think that her sin caused her baby to die. I think it was because, like what the manager said, these girls are hungry. They're going on like a really tough journey. So that's probably what caused the baby to be a stillborn. But I think it's like definite foreshadowing.
Excellent. Yeah. So foreshadowing, such specific foreshadowing that what other element of what Sandry tells Sandry tells Rosa Sharn comes true at the end. Yes. Yes.
I was gonna say she said she wanted a boy and it was a boy, but that was.
No, okay, it was a boy at the end.
I think so.
So is that true? I thought they said they didn't know what it was, right? Or am I imagining things?
Yeah, because it's just like a bloody.
Yeah, I don't know if you could determine. Thanks.
Throwing it.
Well,
The river.
You're getting warmer. What other premonition came true from this part of the story? Yeah, do you remember Fatima? Is that right?
Bloody? I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, there's like a little.
You're right. Woo!
Oh.
Yeah. So the apple box comes back around. It's been foreshadowed in chapter 22. They place it in an apple box at the end of the story.
I just interpreted I just like, I don't care, he just like pushed it.
Well, I won't play the biblical game anymore, but it's Moses, right? So if you're familiar, you know that the idea of putting the baby in the basket, sending it down the river with the reeds, that's all biblical imagery for the story of Moses. But I already tortured you with one story, so I won't torture you with another one. But yeah, the apple box comes back around. So let's jump into these three questions. I showed you on Monday, that clip of Boobie Miles, and I didn't really give you much to go off of why I included that in the course. Cameron, what's your philosophy on Boobie Miles and Rosa Sharon's connection?
I did.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm happy to hear those too. I'm happy to hear anything Cameron has to say. Okay, Cameron's gonna keep thinking about it. Kylie, what do you think?
I compared Booby and Lisbeth as both dark and almost evil characters. Booby is selfish in his attitude towards like football as a team. And then Lisbeth is evil in her virtuous act, I called it.
Okay, all right. Okay, so you went the Boobie and Lisbeth
Yeah,
route.
that's what
Okay.
I thought it was. I don't know.
You know, looking back, maybe I should have specified. What do you think, Karina? I'll get a few volunteers in a second.
I thought it kind of related to both with their sureness about where they were headed before they like faced an obstacle or something. Like in those times, someone who would probably just not be so sure of what was going to happen, whereas he got hurt and he was so sure of his path and where he was headed, before something happened and caused him to have to like figure things out, from a new place and trying to. Didn't think anything bad was gonna happen. She had thought about that. She just, thought about Connie, about the way she was living. She didn't think anything bad was gonna happen to her baby until Sandra introduced the idea that, she could have, like, it could be her fault that something bad happens to the baby. So they were both sure of what was happening until something happened.
So both the film clips that I showed you and this passage are depictions of only Karina, all right, only Karina. Both depictions of characters encountering what? Don't shout it out. Say it again. You're right, but we could go deeper. You were talking about it. I want to nail it down. Starts with a D. Characters encountering. Yep, it's right there. I can see it. You want another letter? Give me an O. I think that's how you spell it. Yeah. Characters encountering. Should I give her another letter? Do you know it?
I'm thinking downfall.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's not what I was thinking. I was thinking a U. Yes, that's what I was thinking. So Boobie Miles, you guys, I know it's quick, but he pulls the magazines out of his locker. I don't know if I showed you that part of the car he wanted to buy. And we talked about how Boobie Miles is just putting all of his eggs in this football basket. And then you encounter doubt because he gets injured. And then he tells the doctor in Midland, like, it's 3 weeks, I'm gonna play. And the guy says, dude, your knee is jacked, you are not gonna play. And when they're both, characters are on this trajectory of sureness about what their future is gonna be. And then they have this really good word, starts with an R-U-P. They have this, they're so sure about their path, and then they have this R-U-P. What's that? Rupture. They have this rupture in their life, and then the world falls apart, right? For Boobie, you see him crying in the car, and with Rosa Sharon later, it's really interesting because kind of the miscarriage and then the very last scene, it all happens really fast together, but you see this rupture in their path and their certainty. And so this is the character encountering doubt for if the possible future isn't going to work out the way that they kind of had it in mind. Other ideas about how they're connected. So we have this idea of characters encountering doubt about their very certain future. Oh, I know you have ideas. I'm coming for you, Zach.
That's what I was gonna say about like Rosa Sharon having Connie and the baby all planned out. And then first Connie leaves, and then she gets this doubt and she starts thinking like, oh, well, then now I'm not gonna have the baby, and then that starts to put into question everything she's ever thought about, and then she first like just kind of accepts it and then she tries to deny it, and then she just keeps not being able to figure out what she wants to do.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, Nikolai, you have anything to add to that?
I was gonna say, they both had, Rose Fern, they both had people telling them like bad news, and it like terrified them both. And in Booby's case, he like started freaking out. And then in Rose Assurance, he was all terrified that she danced. And then so her baby was in the back.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. And that wraps into the doubt idea too. Any other ideas? Yeah.
I think they're both just naive, and that's possibly Miles has like a stronger connection to Rose Shawn than like this bed.
Yes, yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think that's like why it's.
So there's some naivety. I would add that. They both have these naive character like traits to them. Go ahead. Sorry. Rose.
And although he's like selfish, he kind of portrayed as like an evil. It's not like he truly is evil at heart. It's like because of his naivety, it's like he like it's just like it's like ignorance almost.
Sure.
And so they have this like ignorant idea of their lives and how it's gonna turn out, and that they're both so sure of something within like due to their like ignorance, they're just like kind of get hit harder than they would probably for normal person.
Excellent. And then somebody was going to say something over here. Go ahead.
Oh, there's like kind of like, I don't know, like the parental figure, like the one mom, I was gonna say that, like reassure them.
The parental figure of reassurance after. I didn't even think about that. That's really good. I would add that too. The parental figure. Booby's got his uncle, and Rosa Sharon has her mom. So it's a great observation. Yes.
Also along the same lines, there's like a specific character that adds the threat to their life. So like in the movie, it's the doctor who's the bearer of bad news, and in this scene in the novel is Elizabeth, who threatens Rosa Sharon's like whole world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the doctor is to Rose of Sharon, the doctor is to Booby what Lisbeth is to Rose of Sharon, where it's like, that's the character that's going to walk in to the, Booby Miles, his life was, well, no, I wouldn't say that. If you've seen the whole movie, Booby Miles' life is not paradise. You can tell that him and his uncle are lacking financially, that they kind of live in a pretty ramshackle house. And like a lot of kids in real life, football is going to be Booby's ticket out, right? And so he's busting his butt every year to play football because he thinks that that's what's going to lift him out of poverty. And he probably had a pretty good shot of that if it weren't for the accident. And so the doctor telling Booby he can't play, Rosa Sharon being forewarned by by Lisbeth, that her whole world is going to get shook up, kind of have similar scenes in that respect. Yeah.
I want to bring it, well, now that we've talked about it, I've compared other things, but I want to bring it to where I first went to, and I talked about Booby and Elizabeth, and I said that they reflect the irony in both of their situations, where Booby experiences situational irony, and then Elizabeth just isn't aware of, like, she's spreading, I said, it's like she's supposedly Christian, and when you think of Christianity, I normally think of like people like trying to be good, but she's actually spreading fear and unhappiness by sharing her supposed virtuous word. So I thought the irony of both of their situations was a comment.
Excellent. Cool. Excellent. Very good. Last thing I'll add, we've danced around this idea, but I want you to get it in there too. The idea of identity. So Booby Miles' identity is what? Football. Rose of Sharon's identity is, I would say, twofold. Connie, which is what is her identity to Connie? She's wife and then soon to be mother. What other hooks does Connie have to hang her hat on? Nada, right? And I realize that this is, a product of its time, and women didn't have the same opportunities in the third.
Oh.
I saw the flash.
Yeah. Okay, All right, so.
That's why they did it.
So the idea of Rosa Sharon really having her identity tied up in future motherhood and in her wifehood to Connie, just really all of her eggs in that basket. And then we see Boobie Miles just myopically is a good word to know, singular focus, my meaning one, narrow, opt meaning I, myopically focused on football. Those people, when their identity is tied to one idea, and that idea gets what from them? They have a full-on freak out, right? They have a full-on freak out. And the only thing to do, unless you're just gonna suffer endlessly, is to constitute a new what? Identity, right? And so hopefully, you know, if you watch the whole film, hopefully what Boobie does throughout the course of the film is to reconstitute a new identity. And you guys get it, it's kind of a Disney type like idea where he learns to care about the team. If you watch the movie, he cheers on Waterbug at the end and gives him advice. And he learns how to be a team player through losing his identity as hot dog. Can't believe I said that. Hot shot, hot dog, Mr. Jeffries, as hot dog vendor, as he loses his identity as the hot shot big man on campus, varsity superstar. When that gets taken from him, he has to learn how to be a team player. So Rosa Sharon's gonna have to go through the same
Did
thing.
he learn like to do something else with his life, or is he just kind of like a football cheerleader for the rest?
Yeah, he's just kind of like a football has-been, unfortunately, and it's based on a true.
So he's a real guy.
Yeah, it's based on a true story, and they tell you what happens to all of the players at the end. And there's only one player. His name's Preacher Man. He was the really big guy that walks into the locker room. He played at like junior college or like D3 maybe, and none of the other guys went on to play football after high school. So it's wild. But
Did they like win the state championship?
I won't give it away. I won't say anything. I might have signed that film. I can't decide. I'm gonna cut.
I think it's like the state championship.
It's very
Football
difficult.
is like a
Very
big deal.
difficult. Yeah, it's a big deal. You'd think a lot of the guys would have gone pro. Okay, real quick, let's talk about the last two, especially because we lost a few minutes. What do we see about the manager? We've already talked about, well, look, let's just knock it out. Color, white, is he big? No, he's small. We talk about his slightness. He's empathetic, he's caring, he's compassionate. What's specific to Sandry? Should we know that she's dark? She's wrinkly. She's got this reptilian vibe to her. She's menacing. She seems to get pleasure out of, tormenting others, which is the opposite of the manager. But here's the $1 million question, Hoover. Do they have anything in common?
Well, I noticed that even though their beliefs were on the opposite end of the spectrum, they were both really strong in it. So Sandry was like, there's all this sin, people are sinning left and right, and girls are losing their babies because of it. And then the manager comes along and he's like, listen, that's not what happened at all. There's like, you don't have to worry about your sin, because he didn't really touch on the topic of sin a lot, but I got that he didn't really believe that sin was a big part of life, and that he didn't believe that it really affected people as much as he said it.
Excellent. So we have two convicted characters, two strong convictions, even though they're convicted of two completely different things. You guys know people like this where you guys know somebody with very strong convictions, but you don't agree with them, right? Okay, I'm sure we all know people like that. People like that end up in literature because that's part of life. It's the idea of we don't agree, but is how I feel about this is how you feel about this, and we feel equally about these things, but we're on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. That can be difficult to overcome between two people, right? Any other similarities? Yes.
I think someone said that they're different because one like whatever. I said that they both like influencing and being in charge of people.
Excellent. They both kind of want to lead the what? The way of the what?
I said the pack.
And the pack happens to be living in a camp, right? So they both kind of want to be the leader of the camp. And not only that, I would argue in Sandry's weird way, she is worried about the what of the people and the manager is worried about the what of the people. The well-being and the safety, right? So Sandry has her own weird ideas. And what's confusing about Sandry is to the extent that she's making things up to scare Rose of Sharon and the extent to which she believes these things is unclear. However, most students seem to think that she believes what she's saying. She's just a little kooky in a way. By an average readership would gauge her as kooky. But it seems like she really cares about the safety of the people in the camp. And we know the manager does as well. So they're both trying to do the same thing, but in very different ways. All right, lastly, I think this is such an important question, just in the interest of time, who's gonna knock this out of the park for us? All right, the manager, how does the manager say, what is the nature of evil according to the manager?
I mean, from what Sandry says and what the manager says, like, he thinks more in like realist terms, like he says, like hunger, like thirst, people not being able to provide for themselves, that's the true sin is what is kind of what he gets after is that people, but the true sin is that people aren't able to provide for themselves, whereas she thinks in a much more like abstract religious way of like the sin is disobeying the word of God and like not following the righteous path.
Excellent.
So I think, I don't know, in the context of the book, I kind of said, I think the manager is more right in the context of the book because the entire book kind of deals with the idea of people not being able to provide for themselves. And then what happens with the consequences of that, what actions people take in order to provide for themselves and the actions that other people take in order to force their hand and get what they want.
Excellent. Well said. Yeah, I think that's all the ideas are there. We can get it real specific. Anybody want to take those ideas and boil it down a little bit? But you're right on the right track, Zach. Yes.
Well, I
Megan.
would add that like that Sandry she has to put like evil, she has to put blame on someone for the evil. So like even the hunger and poverty, that wasn't necessarily like one person's fault, but she made it Rosa Sharon's fault.
Mhm.
Whereas the manager took it and he made it more broad, and he said these are just issues that are plaguing our society.
So let's get it real specific. And if you don't have this written down, I definitely have it written down. Megan, to Sandry, evil/sin is something that the individual just creates and does. For the manager, evil/sin is something that it pervades the world and it happens to individuals, right? So that's two ways of looking at sin or evil. One is that the individual is sinful and evil and puts that nastiness out into the world. That's what Sandry says. She says, you better protect yourself from sin. You better not be a hook and a collection. You be good. You be a good girl, right? Because you're in charge of keeping yourself from sin. The manager says, you want to see sin? It's banks that are poisoning peaches and kids are starving to death. You know, you want to see evil? It's homes being plowed under that belong to multiple generations. That's sin. That's evil in the world, and it happens to the person as opposed to worrying. Because Ma says, "Look, Rosa Sharon, God doesn't even really think about you. He's got bigger problems. He's not up there watching you. And if you're holding on to Connie too tight, it's like we got big things going on in the world. There's big evil that pervades the universe that God's worried about. He's not worried about one individual and their little sin. So I'm not saying, me personally, I'm not making any type of comment on who's right or who's wrong. I just want you guys to notice in the text, those are very different perspectives on where evil comes from. And we know through a character like Casey, we know how central that idea is to Steinbeck in the novel. We're very interested in the nature of evil in this novel. It's probably, to me, when I read the book, it's the most fundamental question is what is the nature of evil according to Grapes of Wrath? So keep thinking about that. Okay, this class is over in 7 minutes. So I want to do one thing with you. You can pack up everything else. And I'm going to get you rolling on the next one. We're going to do another close read. Oh yeah, I'm so glad I signed up for this class. It's okay. I don't want to quit. I don't want to quit. I don't want to quit. It's fine. Oh, just hold on to that. And we'll start the reading together. And then you guys can finish the reading tonight and then come in with any of your ideas tomorrow. What's up, my friend?
That chapter 5 is one of my other favorite.
Yeah, it's so good. You picked a good one. What was your first favorite chapter?
25.
What happened in 25 again?
That's like the one about like the peaches and are getting poisoned.
Oh, yeah. The one quote I like from the entire 500. All right, so we're just going to listen to the audible until the end of the period, and then you guys can finish up from wherever it gets left off. Now that we've done this once, you guys kind of know how it works, so you should be marking to yourselves the things that you notice.
Jeffrey.
Yeah. Cool. I'll come by and grab it in just a second.
Rolling on the ground, playing the track and rolling on it and picking it up. Diesel tractors puttering while they stood idle. They thundered when they moved and then settled down to a droning roar. snub-nosed monsters, raising the dust and sticking their snouts into it, straight down the country, across the country, through fences, through dooryards, in and out of gullies and straight lines. They did not run on the ground, but on their own roadbeds. They ignored hills and gulches,
Too
water
fast.
courses, fences, houses. The man sitting in the iron seat did not look like a man. Gloved, goggled, rubber dust mask over nose and mouth. He was a part of the monster, a robot in the seat. The thunder of the cylinders sounded through the country, became one with the air and the earth, so that earth and air muttered in sympathetic vibration. The driver could not control it. Straight across country it went, cutting through a dozen farms and straight back. A twitch at the controls could swerve the cat, but the driver's hands could not twitch because the monster that built the tractor, the monster that sent the tractor out, had somehow got into the driver's hands, into his brain and muscle, had goggled him and muzzled him, goggled his mind, muzzled his speech, goggled his perception, muzzled his protest. He could not see the land as it was. He could not smell the land as it smelled. His feet did not stamp the clods or feel the warmth and power of the earth. He sat in an iron seat and stepped on iron pedals. He could not cheer or beat or curse or encourage the extension of his power. Because of this, he could not cheer or whip or curse or encourage himself. He did not know or own or trust or beseech the land. If a seed dropped, did not germinate, it was nothing. If the young thrusting plant withered in drought or drowned in a flood of rain, it was no more to the driver than to the tractor. He loved the land no more than the bank loved the land. He could admire the tractor, its machine surfaces, its surge of power, the roar of its detonating cylinders, but it was not his tractor. Behind the tractor rolled the shining discs, cutting the earth with blades, not plowing, but surgery, pushing the cut earth to the right, but a second row of discs cut it and pushed it to the left, slicing blades shining, polished by the cutter, and pulled behind the discs the harrows, combing with iron teeth so that the little clods broke up and the earth lay smooth. Behind the harrows, the long cedars, 12 curved iron beams erected in the foundry, orgasms set by gears, raping methodically, raping without passion. The driver sat in his iron seat, and he was proud of the straight lines he did not will, proud of the tractor he did not own or love, proud of the power he could not control. And when that crop grew and was harvested, no man had crumbled a hot clod in his fingers and let the earth sift past his fingertips. No man had touched the seed or lusted for the growth. Men ate what they had not raised, had no connection with the bread. The land bore under iron, and under iron gradually died. For it was not loved or hated. It had no prayers or curses. At noon, the tractor driver stopped, sometimes near a tenant house, and opened his lunch. Sandwiches wrapped in waxed paper, white bread, pickle, cheese, Spam, a piece of pie branded like an engine part. He ate without relish, and tenants not yet moved away came out to see him, looked curiously while the goggles were taken off, and the rubber dust mask, leaving white circles around the eyes and a large white circle around nose and mouth. The exhaust of the tractor puttered on, for fuel is so cheap it is more efficient to leave the engine running than to heat the diesel nose for a new start. Curious children crowded close, ragged children who ate their fried dough as they watched. They watched hungrily the unwrapping of the sandwiches, and their hunger-sharpened noses smelled the pickle, cheese, and Spam. They didn't speak to the driver. They watched his hand as it carried food to his mouth. They did not watch him chewing. Their eyes followed the hand that held the sandwich. After a while, the tenant who could not leave the place came out and squatted in the shade beside the tractor. "What? You're Joe Davis's boy?" "Sure," the driver said. "Well, what you doing this kind of work for?"
That's a good place to have about a minute. So read the rest of it tonight, mark it up, come in with your ideas. We'll do the same process on this one as the previous passage. So I welcome all your fantastic ideas. Then just don't forget about Friday. We'll do the 15 questions. Yeah, she's wincing. 15 questions on how to read literature like a professor, and then you'll write that essay on either the flood, Jim Casey, or California. Is there anyone that doesn't know what that quiz is about? You need to come talk to me if you don't, because I have a handout for it, but don't show up on Friday having not gotten the handout because you'll be lost, okay?